is November 8th, 2002. My partner is Knudsen. I am Michael O'Connell. We'll be interviewing Donald Phillips, who was a corporal in the United States Army during Korea. Mr. Phillips, I'd like to start with your life before you entered the service. When and where were you born?
Well, I was born in Utica, and then we lived in Madison all my life. I lived on the home farm, and I still live there.
Okay. What education did you receive prior to the Korean conflict?
Just high school.
High school. When did you first hear about a possible war in Korea?
When it happened.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, we see Korea was something that we hadn't any of us heard about, you know. You didn't, anybody, you know, young people, we didn't care about those things and hear about those things, and all of a sudden there was a war there. And it got pretty close to me eventually.
Did you enlist or were you
No, I
drafted?
was drafted.
Oh, you were. Where were you sent for basic training?
Fort Dix, New Jersey.
What was the atmosphere like there?
Well, it was, of course, you know, I was just a young country bumpkin kid, and it was all new to me. It was a vast, to me, it was vast, and you know what I mean. It was in the wintertime, and it was cold there, and we had to. It was pretty much like here, open country, and we went through basic training, and that's about all they gave us is just a basic training, and then we were out of there.
Oh, so you didn't receive like any extra training?
No, Lord's sakes, no. We were. I was out and on the way, real quickly.
When did you find out you were going to be sent? Like the date? Do you remember that?
To Korea, you mean?
Yeah.
As we finished basic, they took us in, and they were very kind. They didn't say you're going to Korea. They said that some went to the European theater and some went to the Asian theater, and that was called FECOM. That's where they said, you just heard the word FECOM, and then you could have gone anywhere in the European, in the Asian theater. See? Well, at that time, FECOM meant Korea.
Oh. What did you expect to find when you got there?
Just pretty much what I did find. They had told us, briefed us, said it was all hilly and backward country, and there was no modern facilities to speak of. It was all just back, and it was all back country, more or less.
What was a standard weapon that infantrymen used?
Your M1 rifle was your infantryman's tools.
You were a rifleman?
No, I was in the mortar platoon, F company, and I was with the small mortars. They were the 60mm mortar, and they set up on a tripod, and they weren't very big. The whole projector wasn't only about that long, the whole thing, and you dropped it in a cylinder. And on the bottom it had a detonator with different size charges of gunpowder on the end of it that propelled it. And then you set the tripod and the cylinder at different angles to get your distance. I have a little chart here that tells how many charges you put on to go so far and all like that. It might be interesting to you boys to look at here. That you can see the number of feet and yards that you could shoot with different degrees.
Oh, that's very interesting.
I don't know how I happened to retain that. It just found it in. I didn't realize it was there until I started looking for things the other day.
Huh. Were you elected to the mortar patrol? Were you just assigned to that unit? Or
You were just assigned. You weren't. You couldn't do anything about what you got. You heard these statements. You get what you see, or what you see is what you get. Well, that's the way it was. They told us what we did. And there was no way around it in any way.
When were you first sent into combat?
When I got into Korea, we landed at Inchon, and we went by motorcade up to Watchon Valley, and we stayed there from the middle of June until 31st of August. Is the first time that I saw any combat whatsoever. And we were taken up on a hill, and today I can't remember the name of the hill, and we were only up there overnight, and we got riddled so badly, they killed so many, that they sent us right back into rest area, and then filled our ranks again, and we trained some more. And then a day before Thanksgiving or so, we were taken up again. Then,
Oh, go ahead.
and that's the only time that I ever was in combat, and we was only up there a couple of days. And then I got wounded and sent back.
So it was a very hostile situation?
Oh yes, it was all hostile all the
Yeah.
while. You know, and you didn't see anybody other than your, the locals that was, and they mostly worked for us, the little people, the little short pipe people, we call them the gooks, And they were Koreans, they were South Koreans, and they worked for us, and they did all of our packing and, our toting and things like that. Our ammo, they carried all the ammo for us and things like that.
How was the morale between the men like during combat?
Well, you had to have morale. You had to be with you had to have a buddy because your life depended on it. You know what I mean? So you had to be quite congenial with one another in order to exist.
Yeah, so comradeship was a big
Comradeship was a big thing. That's right. Yeah.
Now, what were your officers like?
Well, for the most part, they were pretty decent. For the most part, they were. We had some that were, green and young and like ourselves, but for the most part, they had their things together pretty well. I remember one night we were up on a point, and the first time we went up there, and we had a very brand new lieutenant, second lieutenant that had just come himself, and it got pretty hot and heavy. They overrun us out on the point, and he ran, and Corporal jumped in the trench and said, "That's far enough, sir," and pointed his BAR at him, and he stopped him from running away, and he turned around and he finished the battle. But
when you said BAR, what is that?
It's like a good big heavy deer rifle that you have today. Only it has tripods on it, and you can put the tripods down and get a better aim.
Yeah.
It's just a small arms craft.
In the questionnaire, you previously mentioned Sergeant Franzen. Is that correct?
Pardon me?
Sergeant Franzen?
Yes, he was a sergeant, and I was a corporal, and he is the one who did all of the calibrating of the weapon, and I was the one that had to put the shell in the in the thing, and then I was also responsible for the radio. See? And that was always hooked to the command post and back, and it was just a little line wire, light wire, and you had screwed it onto here, and it was screwed on in the other end, and you talked back and forth over this telephone. And that was my responsibility, to keep that working, and to keep the supply the sergeant with the ammunition. I mean, from this pile to there. The Koreans carried it for us up to the place there. Sergeant Franzen and I are still good friends. He lives in Iowa, and we correspond all the while. I went out a couple of times, and he's been out here.
So he was one of your good comrades from the war?
Yeah, he's right. And he and I still call back and forth and speak to one another.
Were there many other individuals that left an impression on you after the war?
Well, no, because after the war, I didn't ever do any more military stuff. I was in the hospital with my injuries for a long, long time, and then very short period after I was released from the hospital, I was stationed in Albany in a 108 CIC, and I took care of it was my job to take care of the vehicles there. And all we had was 5 cars. Just sedans to run around with, and that was my job after I got out of the hospital.
Oh, so that's what you meant by a section runner? Is that?
No, a section runner is what you called me when I was up on the front.
Oh, okay.
I was a section runner there, and by meaning that, they mean to take care of the telephone and things like that back to the rear echelon. And they had to run things back and forth, but they meant that when they said it, they meant by phone, you know.
Oh, okay. As a section runner, did you have many close calls other than being wounded?
Oh, that first night that we were up on there, where we were run over there, it was kind of amusing after it all happened. I was in the trenches, and all of a sudden there was a lot of fire, and I said, "Oh, I've been hit!" And I was hit in the shoulder, back shoulder, with a chunk of stone from a stone that was a ricochet off of the stone behind me, and flew up and hit me in the back, and I thought I had been shot, and I only had been hit with a little piece of stone. That was kind of comical. After it was over,
sure.
After the fact is, right.
Where were you wounded? In what section of the body?
Right close to the Watchon Valley, just up north a little bit, and it's called No Name Hill. That's all it was named, is No Name Hill. It was a long finger that was going out like this, and it was 6 feet wide on top. And they'd been shelling it for some time, and they had not hit it. And that night, or that noon, they got 3 shells in. And I'm the only one that survived the 3 shots. It landed between my feet, and it blew me in the air. Quite a ways. I don't suppose long ways, but it seemed like a long ways, and it seemed like I was up there forever.
What happened to you after you were wounded? Where did you go?
Well, that was Thanksgiving Day, and it was just as nice as it is out now in the morning. And it began to rain and drizzle, and I got hit at about 1 o'clock, and it took them from then until 6 o'clock to get me down to the center where the first aid center. I was carried by litter, and it took them till 6 o'clock to get me there. And by the time that I got there, 40% of the platoon was there with frostbite. That's how fast the weather changed in Korea. From a balmy day to frostbite before dark.
Jeez.
And then I went right from there to Seoul, and then I went to Japan, and then home.
What was the treatment like in the hospitals that you experienced there?
Well, there in Seoul Hospital, it was kind of like a MASH outfit. You see MASH on television, didn't you?
Yeah.
Well, it was pretty much like that, only no joking or no fun. But it was just a meat factory place, you know. They just patched you up the best they could and got you out of there. And then we went to Japan, and I was in Osaka, Nagoya Air Force Hospital in Japan. And I was there until the middle of January. And then they shipped me home.
After you were wounded, did you hold much hostility towards the North Koreans? Do you to this day?
Oh, I suppose as a young man I did at the time, but I didn't, it didn't last long if I did, you know.
Yeah. When were you awarded the Purple Heart?
After I got back to the States, I don't know, sometime probably February, March. I mean, shortly after I was home, I was awarded it. And this is the Purple Heart.
After the U.S. pulled out of Korea, what were the feelings like among the soldiers?
Well, I don't remember because I was back at the States pretty much after that time, and well, I guess probably it was pretty much like the Desert Storm and the last one we was in, they felt that the job had not been completed. And it hasn't, and they're still at it, you know.
What did you do after you left the Army?
I went to work for Madison School as a cross guard. I was probably feeling sorry for myself, not thinking I could do manual labor with my knees and my hand, and this job come along and I accepted it, and I went there to help them until 1st of May until the end of the school year, and I stayed for 36 years. I later become a janitor and a night janitor. I was in there alone for a long time at night, and then in 1965, I decided the job wasn't going anywhere, and so I went home and ran a small farm and drove school bus until my retirement in 1989. So you see, I've been with guys like you for a long time.
How do you feel about the Korean conflict 50 years later?
There isn't much of any feeling about it. It's just that it was something that we did, and I guess at the time they thought they had to. I don't know. I don't have any hard feelings about it or anything like that. They were just a pretty poor country that needed some help, I guess, is what happened.
Were there any other stories that you'd like to include in the interview?
Well, when we first got into Korea there, we were going by motorcade from Inchon up, and something in the motorcade somewhere, something stalled and stopped. And there we were, sitting in these trucks. And the truck that I was in, sitting right beside a public bathroom that the Japanese or the Koreans used. And in Korea, they use the human waste as fertilizer. And this old guy had a cart with a barrel on it, and he had a bucket on the end of a long stick, and he was forking this human stuff into a barrel. And needless to say, it did not smell well. We were there, and we couldn't get away, so I had to stay there and smell it. It was not funny at the time. It was kind of comical as years gone by, but it wasn't very funny then.
Mr. Phillips, we'd like to thank you for coming in. And
Well, I
sharing your
enjoyed
great
it
story
while I
with
was
you.
here. Not a bad sort at all. I enjoyed visiting with you.
Thanks a lot, sir.
And there's the Korean medal. I probably would like to see that. Take it off my fingers, or just open it up and pull it out and look at it. That was just awarded to me recently. A 3 years ago, maybe. Here's some other pictures here, and here's a newspaper clipping of the area that I was in.